Hi, welcome to Fiction Fingers Fairy Channel. Please subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. And don't forget to like and share this video, thank you. As evening approached, Diana would once again retreat to the kitchen to prepare dinner for her family. She needs to juggle multiple tasks at once between cooking and supervising her children's homework, taking care of her 3-year-old toddler and her dementia mother-in-law. As she stirred pots on the stove and chopped vegetables, Diana couldn't help but feel the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. "Sophie, sweetheart, could you play quietly for a little while? Mommy needs to finish making dinner," she gently requested, her tone reflecting the strain of her exhaustion. Despite her best efforts to stay focused, Diana found herself constantly pulled in different directions. "Mom, where's my backpack?" Bobby called out, his voice tinged with frustration as he searched for his school bag amidst the clutter of the living room. Diana sighed, feeling the stress of the situation mounting with each passing moment. As she continued to cook, Diana kept a watchful eye on Sophie, who was playing nearby. "Be careful, Sophie, don't touch the stove," she cautioned, her voice filled with concern as she balanced the demands of her cooking with the need to keep her youngest daughter safe. With dinner finally ready, Diana felt a sense of relief wash over her, knowing that one task was complete. However, her stress only seemed to intensify as she realized that she still had to supervise Sophie's bath and tend to Madame Carroll's needs before the night was over. As Diana served dinner to her family once again, she found herself unable to enjoy her own meal. "Here you go, Sophie, open wide," she said softly, spoon-feeding her toddler with practiced patience, all the while keeping a watchful eye on Madame Carroll's needs. Meanwhile, Nancy and Bobby were engrossed in their playful antics, their laughter filling the air as they took bites between bursts of energy. "Nancy, Bobby, please try to eat your dinner properly," Diana gently reminded them, her voice tinged with exhaustion as she struggled to maintain control over the chaotic dinner table. As she balanced the demands of feeding her toddler, attending to Madame Carroll, and managing her older children's behavior, Diana felt an overwhelming sense of stress wash over her. Her own appetite was forgotten amidst the flurry of activity, replaced instead by a knot of tension in her stomach and a lump in her throat. She fought back the urge to cry, willing herself to stay composed for the sake of her family. Despite her best efforts to keep her emotions in check, Diana felt a sense of despair creeping in as she grappled with the overwhelming weight of her responsibilities. "Let's finish up dinner, everyone," she said cheerfully, her voice belying the inner turmoil she felt. As the day drew to a close, Diana began the nightly routine of tucking her children into bed, a moment she cherished despite her fatigue. "Good night, my loves," she whispered softly, pressing kisses to their foreheads as she tucked them in snugly, her heart overflowing with love for her precious children. Nancy, Bobby, and Sophie would murmur their sleepy goodnights in return, their voices filled with warmth and affection as they drifted off to sleep. Once her children were settled, Diana turned her attention to her mother-in-law, Madame Carroll, gently guiding her towards her bedroom. "Time for bed, Mom," she said tenderly, offering her arm for support as they made their way down the hallway. Madame Carroll would nod sleepily as she allowed herself to be led to her room. With Madame Carroll safely tucked into bed, Diana finally made her way to her own bedroom, a sense of weariness settling over her like a heavy blanket. Despite her exhaustion, she knew that her night was far from over. There were still dishes to be washed, laundry to be folded, and preparations to be made for the next day. As she settled into bed, Diana couldn't shake the feeling of overwhelm that washed over her. With a deep sigh, Diana closed her eyes and allowed herself to relax, the events of the day slowly fading into the background as she surrendered to the embrace of sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As usual, Peter would only return home late at night, sometimes not returning at all. "I have to stay back at the office," he texted, his tone devoid of any warmth or intimacy. Diana, accustomed to Peter's distant demeanor, simply replied with a curt, "Okay." The exchange left Diana feeling a sense of resignation, as she had grown accustomed to Peter's frequent late nights and lack of emotional connection. Despite longing for a more affectionate response, she knew better than to expect it from her husband. Even when Peter was at home, his mood was often distant and irritable. "Can't you see I'm busy?" he would snap impatiently, his frustration bubbling to the surface as Diana tried to engage him in conversation. His harsh words stung Diana deeply, leaving her feeling unappreciated and alone in her own home. Despite her efforts to salvage their relationship, Diana couldn't shake the feeling that their marriage was slipping away from her grasp. "I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this," she would admit to herself in a moment of painful honesty, her heart heavy with sorrow as she faced the harsh reality of their situation. One day while Peter was at home, he stepped into the shower. Suddenly, Peter's phone began to ring. Diana picked up the phone and the voice of a woman could be heard on the other end. "Hi, love," the woman said cheerfully. Diana was taken aback, her heart pounding with a mixture of shock and disbelief. She quickly informed the woman that she was Peter's wife, expecting a reaction of surprise or embarrassment. However, to her astonishment, the woman on the other end of the line remained calm and composed. "I know who you are," the woman replied casually. "I'm Maria, Peter's girlfriend." Diana's mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions as she tried to process the woman's words. Anger, hurt, and betrayal surged through her veins, threatening to overwhelm her. "How could you do this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and pain. The woman on the other end of the line remained unfazed by Diana's outburst. "I'm sorry if this comes as a shock to you," she said calmly, "but Peter and I have been seeing each other for quite some time now." Diana's heart shattered into a million pieces as the reality of her husband's infidelity sank in. She felt a tidal wave of despair wash over her, leaving her feeling lost and broken. "How could he do this to me?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper as tears welled up in her eyes. As the conversation continued, Diana struggled to maintain her composure, her emotions threatening to consume her. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "How could he betray me like this?" The woman's response was cold and indifferent, her words like daggers piercing Diana's wounded heart. "I'm sorry, but Peter and I have something special," she said dismissively. "I'm sure you understand." Diana's world crumbled around her as she listened to the woman's callous words. She felt a sense of profound betrayal wash over her, as the realization sank in that the man she loved had been living a double life behind her back. After hanging up the phone, Diana anxiously waited for Peter to finish his shower. When Peter emerged from the bathroom, his hair still damp, Diana wasted no time in confronting him about the call from Maria. "Who was that on the phone, Peter?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. Peter's expression darkened as he realized that Diana had answered the call. "It's none of your business," he snapped, his tone sharp and defensive. But Diana refused to back down, her determination to uncover the truth outweighing her fear of his reaction. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Diana pleaded with Peter to tell her the truth. "Please, Peter, I deserve to know," she begged, her voice choked with emotion. "Is there something going on between you and Maria?" Peter's silence spoke volumes, confirming Diana's worst fears. "Yes, there is," he admitted proudly. "Maria and I are having an affair, and I love her." Diana felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath her feet, her world spinning out of control as Peter's words echoed in her ears. "How could you do this to me?" she cried, her heart breaking into a million pieces as the full extent of Peter's betrayal became painfully clear. Peter's response was callous and indifferent, his words like a dagger to Diana's wounded heart. "I don't owe you any explanations," he said coldly, his eyes devoid of remorse or compassion. "This is my life, and I'll do whatever makes me happy." Diana's chest tightened with anguish as she struggled to comprehend the magnitude of Peter's betrayal. "But what about us? What about our marriage?" she pleaded, her voice filled with desperation as she clung to the hope of salvaging what was left of their shattered relationship. Peter's expression remained stoic and unmoved, his resolve unyielding in the face of Diana's anguish. "Our marriage is over," he declared, his words like a death knell ringing in Diana's ears. "I've made my decision and there's nothing you can do to change it." As the reality of Peter's betrayal sank in, Diana felt a sense of profound grief wash over her, leaving her feeling hollow and numb. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper as she struggled to come to terms with the devastating loss of the life she had once known. As Diana sat alone in the quiet of her bedroom, tears streaming down her cheeks, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the weight of Peter's betrayal. "I thought we had a happy marriage, but it was all a lie," she whispered to herself, her voice filled with anguish as she struggled to make sense of the pain that consumed her. With a heavy heart, Diana's thoughts turned to her children, Nancy, Bobby, and Sophie. What will happen to them now? She wondered aloud, her voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. How will they cope with the news of their father's affair? How will this affect their future? As she contemplated the challenges that lay ahead, Diana couldn't shake the feeling of overwhelming sadness that enveloped her. As the night wore on, Diana found herself wrestling with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "I don't know how to move forward from this," she admitted to herself, her voice barely above a whisper as she struggled to find a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to consume her. "But I have to find a way, for the sake of my children." In the midst of her despair, Diana clung to the memories of happier times, drawing strength from the love she shared with her children. "We'll get through this together," she whispered, her voice filled with determination as she vowed to rebuild their lives and find happiness once again. "No matter what, we'll always have each other." To be continued.